America has been hiding Black history from you for centuries. Our people were violated, erased, buried, and Texas has spent decades pretending none of it ever existed. All lies. They called it just another dig, but the ground told a different story. The soil trembled as the shovels cut deeper, coughing up bones and rusted chains, proof of lives stolen and silenced. The air thickened, heavy with whispers too old to name. Shadows clung to every fragment pulled from the earth, as if the land itself had been guarding a secret soaked in blood. But what if the secret Texas tried to bury was never fully dead? Each strike of metal against dirt echoed like a warning. Some truths rot in the dark, waiting for the right moment to claw their way back to light. And now, the silence of Texas is starting to scream. A backhoe clawed into the Texas dirt and struck bone, human, weathered, gray, then another, and another, until the earth began giving up its secrets. 95 Black bodies, buried without names, without coffins that lasted, without a trace the world was ever meant to find. The youngest was just 14, the oldest maybe 70. Their bones were their testimonies, spines crushed by years of bending, ribs cracked and healed wrong, ankles scarred where iron had bitten through flesh. Some still bore the marks of chains, rust welded into bone. For a century, they lay hidden beneath modern Texas, under schools, suburbs, and playgrounds, while life went on above them as if nothing had ever happened. But when the truth finally surfaced, Texas buried them again. Thanksgiving Eve, 2019. Quietly, in the dark. The name of the site changed. History rewritten. One more time. They buried them twice. Once to silence their suffering, once to silence their story. Because what those bones revealed was something too dangerous to admit. Slavery never ended here. It just changed its name. And the ground is still keeping count.
The Sugar Bowl of Death. They called it freedom. But in Texas, freedom came with change you couldn't see. Before the war, the land between the Brazos and Colorado rivers had been the empire of sugar, the crop that fed the richest families and killed the people who made it grow. By 1860, more than 182,000 enslaved people lived in Texas, nearly a third of the entire population. Along the river counties, the numbers climbed even higher. 72% enslaved, the largest concentration west of the Mississippi. To the white planters, Black life was currency. A strong field hand sold for $1,200. Good land? Just $6 an acre. A single man was worth 200 times more than the soil he bled into. And on those sugar plantations, death worked faster than the overseers. Harvest season meant 16-hour days, cutting 10-foot sugarcane with machetes, feeding the stalks into boiling mills where the air shimmered at 120 degrees. The swamps bred malaria. The work shattered bones, rotted lungs, broke spirits. Enslaved women stopped bearing children, their bodies collapsing under the weight of exhaustion and infection. People called it the slaughterhouse of the slave trade, and they weren't wrong.
When Mexico outlawed slavery, Texas didn't debate. It seceded. 1836. A new republic built explicitly to keep slavery legal. When the U.S. welcomed Texas in 1845, it did so under a promise that nothing, no law, no war, would touch that institution. Then came the Civil War, and after it, Juneteenth. Freedom, read from a balcony in Galveston. But Texas wasn't mourning its lost wealth, it was recalculating it. The men who once held chains found a new way to tighten them. They wrote laws instead of contracts. They called them the Black Codes. Now, being Black and unemployed was a crime. Being poor was vagrancy. Being defiant was breach of contract. Those who couldn't pay were auctioned, again, to plantations, to farms, to the very same fields their ancestors had died in. The plantations stayed. The crops stayed. Only the word slave disappeared. Because in Texas, freedom was never the end of slavery. It was just its disguise. This is exactly why we created Black Stories Untold, to bring you the stories they tried to erase from history. If you believe these hidden truths need to be told, subscribe to our channel and help us spread awareness of the history they don't want you to know. Hit that subscribe button and share this video. Now,
Back to the story. The hellhole on the Brazos. Freedom had an asterisk, small enough to miss, sharp enough to bleed. When the guns went silent and the Union flag rose over Texas, the chains didn't fall. They just changed shape. Paper replaced iron. On the balconies where orders were read, words like justice and liberty hung in the air. But in the fields, the sound was the same. The crack of whips disguised as law. Texas called it progress, but the plantations never stopped breathing. They only learned a new rhythm, one beat by courtrooms, sheriffs, and judges instead of overseers. The black codes gave slavery a new uniform. Being unemployed meant vagrancy. Walking away from an abusive job meant breach of contract. Speaking back to a white man meant insulting behavior. Each charge carried the same sentence, forced labor. And the loophole waited quietly inside the 13th Amendment, 6 words that reshaped the world. Except as punishment for crime. Those words built a bridge between the plantation and the prison. By 1867, Texas had begun leasing prisoners to private companies. 90% were black. The state called it justice. The men running it called it business. In 1878, 2 former Confederate officers, men who had once fought to preserve slavery, approached the state with a proposal. Give us every prisoner you have, and we'll pay for each one. Texas agreed. The men merged their sugar plantations into a single empire along the Brazos River, a place that became a whispered warning through black communities. The hellhole on the Brazos. Death lingered over that river like mist. 3 out of every 100 prisoners died each year, some from heat, some from infection, others from the quiet exhaustion of being forgotten. Malaria thrived in the marshes. Tuberculosis filled the barracks. Shackles rusted into flesh until bone and metal fused. Guards called it shackle poisoning, a phrase so casual it made death sound routine. A prison inspector visited one camp and wrote, "These men, at the time, had no medical attention. Essential medicines were not at the camp. The sick occupied the same building with the well. Under slavery, a man's life had at least been a financial investment. Under convict leasing, life meant nothing. When a prisoner collapsed, the company simply requested another. The state obliged. The arrests kept coming. Petty theft, curfew violations, disrespect. A man who stole food for his family could face a $50 fine, more than he'd earn in a month. Unable to pay, he'd work the debt off in the fields, though the debt grew faster than his body could heal." By the early 1900s, ownership changed hands. In 1908, a sugar company bought the land. A year later, Texas opened its first state-run prison farm on the same soil. Different names, same fields, same chains. The men still cut cane with machetes, still labored from dawn until dark, still died nameless in the same red clay. And when the earth cracked open in 2018, 95 bodies surfaced from beneath that same ground, buried between 1878 and 1911. No records, no markers, no trace of who they'd been or what false crime condemned them. The hellhole on the Brazos never ended. It simply learned to hide, shifting its face, burying its cruelty beneath quiet towns and sun-bleached fields. The screams faded, but the soil remembers. Every breeze that passes over that river still carries the stench of what was done there. Evil doesn't vanish, it adapts, waiting for the moment someone dares to dig too deep. Terror as economic control. Lynching in Texas read like a work schedule, timed for harvest, for labor disputes, for any moment a black worker looked likely to leave. Terror wasn't random, it was a tool. Scare people into staying, keep wages low, and make resistance deadly. In Waco, a crowd dragged a black teenager from a courtroom, tortured him in the street, photographed the torture, and turned those images into souvenirs. Nobody answered for it. Across the state, juries and judges looked the other way. The law protected the terror because the terror protected profit. In Slocum, rumors of rebellion sent white mobs hunting black families in their homes and fields. The official count of the dead stayed low. The real toll, survivors said, was far higher. Whole communities emptied out, land abandoned, generations displaced because violence worked as a ledger. fewer black landowners, cheaper labor for everyone else. The survivors faced a second trap: sharecropping and debt peonage. Families worked land for a share that vanished once landlords subtracted food, rent, tools, expenses calculated by the owner's books. Try to leave with a balance owed, and the courts called you a criminal. The debt kept growing. The law chained you where the ledger said you belonged. When convict leasing supposedly ended, the state bought the same plantations and turned them into prison farms. Different signs on the gates, the same fields, the same crops, the same unpaid labor. Today, prisons still run farms, prisoners still harvest cotton and cane for nothing, and the state still profits. Names changed: slavery, convict leasing, chain gangs, prison labor, but the machinery never did. Terror kept labor cheap. Paperwork kept it lawful. The chains never broke. They only learned to look like law. The cover-up. When the chains came off, the silence began. The land that once fed on forced labor was reborn as a suburb. Bright lawns, shopping centers, schools with polished floors. A model city, they called it. Clean, modern, forgetful. Not a word about the blood beneath it. City brochures spoke of pioneers and tenacious spirits. The Heritage Museum displayed sugar mills and uniforms, but never the people who died running them. Even the city's website scrubbed every trace of its origin story. When asked, an official once said, "Nothing here traces back to slavery or convict leasing." Every word was a lie, because the roads, the buildings, the wealth, all of it stood on bones. One man refused to let the lie stand. A former prison guard who'd seen the system from the inside. He collected records, death certificates, burial maps. He warned the school district for years, "If you dig on that land, you'll find bodies." They laughed it off until the backhoe hit bone. 95 skeletons surfaced, hands still clenched, teeth worn down from cane knives, ribs cracked from labor that never ended. A task force voted almost unanimously to honor them where they were found, to build a memorial over the field that swallowed them. The school district said no, it would slow construction. They fought in court, they won, and the bodies were moved in silence, buried again the night before Thanksgiving. No marker, no names, no truth. The city renamed the site, as if history could be paved over. But those 95 weren't the only ones. Across the county, thousands more remained buried beneath parking lots, housing tracts, and shopping centers. Beneath playgrounds and highways. Developers don't look for them. The land's too valuable now. And yet, the line from then to now is straight as the fields they once worked. Slavery became convict leasing. Convict leasing became chain gangs. Chain gangs became mass incarceration. The names changed, but the purpose stayed. Black Americans make up 13% of the population, yet nearly 40% of prisoners. The same amendment that ended slavery left one door open, except as punishment for a crime. Through that door, the system walked right back in. They want us to forget, because memory is rebellion. To remember is to ask who built the wealth, who paid the price, and why the chains still rattle, quietly now, behind prison walls. The bones that won't stay buried. Now in the final reckoning, the buried past presses against the present, refusing to stay silent. They found them by accident. 95 bodies, ages 14 to 70. Bones bent from endless labor, spines twisted from carrying sugarcane, jaws deformed from malnutrition. Between 1878 and 1911, they were buried in cheap pine boxes, stacked like cargo, nameless, disposable. Someone wanted them forgotten, but the earth remembered. A century later, the ground gave them back, and when those bones surfaced, so did the truth, because history doesn't rot, it waits. It waits under playgrounds and parking lots, under highways and polished neighborhoods built from its silence. Every shopping mall in that county stands on sacred ground. Every foundation rests on someone's grave. The 95 refused to stay buried, and they are not alone. Thousands more remain hidden beneath Texas soil. Laborers who built the wealth of a state that never planned to acknowledge them. Their bones still whisper through the roots, still press against the surface, waiting for someone to listen. Because the story isn't over. People alive today had grandparents in those camps. Their bloodline still carries the echoes of chains, of hunger, of separation. Families still searching for names they were never allowed to know. Communities still trapped in systems that never ended, just learned to wear a suit and call themselves law. Texas buried the bodies, then it buried the truth. It paved over prisons, renamed the fields, built suburbs over graves, and called it progress. But underneath every road, every house, every school built on that soil, there's blood, there's bone, there's history that won't stay quiet. Texas built its empire on black blood, and every empire built on blood eventually hears it calling. Say their names, even if we don't know them. Demand markers, demand memory, demand truth. Because this isn't just history. This is the foundation America still stands on. Until we face it, we're still walking on graves. And one day, the ground will open again. If those 95 could speak from the dirt they were buried in, what message would they give Texas now? Comment below. We'd like to hear what echoes you think the past would send back. What you witnessed scratches the surface. Watch the next video to uncover the hidden forces and forgotten stories quietly shaping our present, and the truths too few